Okay, so this is my second life story vodcast, and I'm here with my dad. Dad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Joseph Scott.
Yes. So, just to get right into it, this is for my psychology class, and I'm going to ask you a few questions primarily pertaining to aging. So, just answer them as you see fit.
Okay.
So, first of all, I wanted to ask you I know you immigrated here from Ireland when you were in your 20s, but at what age, it doesn't really matter what the answer is, but at what age did you really start to feel like you were an adult? I know that adulthood is typically defined as like when you turn 18, but was there a specific age that...
Probably when I first came to America, so more than likely that was when it was.
Okay, is there any specific reason why?
Because I then had to move out of home and was on my own and had to fend for myself in the US.
Mm-hmm. So you felt that you really only became an adult once you started to become more independent?
Yes.
Okay, do you know what age that was?
I was probably 24, 25.
Okay. Kind of similar to that, going off of it, if you could relive 1 year of your life, which year would it be and why? This was similar to a question we were asked in class, and it was, I believe, if you could go back and relive age 7 or go forward and be, I think, in your 60s, which one would you pick?
It would probably be the year 2006, I would say.
Okay, why is that?
We had premature twins in those days, and we went through a lot, and there was a lot of things we learned there in that year.
Okay, so even though you had premature twins, that would be my brother Patrick, you would still go back and relive that year? Or you
Yes,
would redo
I think
it?
there was things I would have done differently in that year if I could have. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's interesting you'd want to go back and do things differently and not like go back and relive it so you could experience it again. That's an interesting take.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I also wanted to ask you, obviously you're in your 60s. My dad works in finance. You're a CFO, right?
Yes.
So a high-level financial role. And I know that around your age, a lot of your friends are considering retirement, but you want to continue working, correct? So I was wondering if you worried at all that you may experience ageism going forward, since I'd say you're probably in the higher end of ages at the company, or do you feel like maybe you've ever even now been looked down upon by younger coworkers?
No, the challenge is to relate to other generations who have different priorities and different ways of looking at life versus what I might have been brought up with and what my experiences were.
Okay.
It's to be able to relate to younger workers is probably the challenge.
So do you feel like you've ever seen ageism at all within your company?
Not directly within my company. I have seen it some elsewhere in life, but not directly in my company.
So, like, have you seen it within your industry or in work in general?
There can be a little bit of it when in the industry. Generally, though, it's a little bit different. There, people are looking for folks that have more experience, and the older you get, the more experience you have. So there might be a positive impact to it there.
Okay, I feel like that's an interesting take, because when I hear about it, it's more like they want to bring in new, kind of just freshly graduated students who have like a fresh perspective, but you think experience may matter more in some cases.
Well, I think the issue that the industry I'm in, which is the biotech industry, is facing is people that are older are tending to retire, and then the next level doesn't have the same experience. So there's more value put on those of us that are still not retired because we have that bit more of broader and depth of experience.
Okay, so you may consider it an advantage then.
Yes, as of currently it is, but the challenge of it is to keep pace with the high demands and the work-life balance. That becomes more difficult the older you get.
Okay, that makes sense, especially with like physical challenges and like health as you get older.
Yes.
Okay. Kind of similarly to that, not just in like a workplace context, but do you feel that society in general may overlook older generations?
Yes, I do.
In what ways?
In that I don't think that they consider that folks with more that are older have more deeper life experiences and may be more able to deal with adversity than those that are younger, so they don't get recognized and maybe valued as much, that life experience.
Do you feel like at any time you've been overlooked just in life in general, like in a day-to-day setting?
Not me personally, but I think there are friends of mine that have been, yes.
Okay. Any specific examples?
A couple of my friends have been overlooked for CFO roles because even though they had the relevant experience, it was felt that they might not be able to keep up with the pace of the job.
But you think they would be able to keep up?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I do think society has a very negative connotation of older people, and then it's funny because I feel like they'll reach that age and look back and realize that they were incorrect.
Yes.
So I think that I know you've probably heard of like midlife crisis or whatever that stereotype, but I do think that midlife is a very pivotal time in one's life with a lot of challenges and just a lot of transitional periods. Do you think that at your point in midlife, whatever you would define that as, do you experience any challenges that changed your life going forward?
Yeah, I had, first we had 4 young children when I was in my early 40s, and I was trying to balance a very high demanding job and some of those children had some medical challenges that required additional time. So balancing all of that and where I was in my career in my early 40s was certainly a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that impacted like you as a person now, like in how you live your life going forward after that?
I think
point?
it gives you greater priority, gives you greater understanding what's really important and what's not, and that you have to pace yourself.
Okay. So would you say maybe your midlife was the most challenging point that you've experienced
Yes,
to date?
I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that tracks with what I've learned. I'm interested to see how my midlife potential crisis goes.
Hopefully better.
Yeah, hopefully. And then, so I know that our family has a history of dementia. I know Granddad had dementia.
Yes.
So based on that and other genetics, any genetic history, do you think that you approach planning for the future differently
Yes.
than most would?
Yes. So I'd say how that's reflected is I do not do some of the things that my parents did, which was one of them smoked extensively and didn't really take care of his health as much as he should. So I've tried to avoid some of those similar things.
Do you think that, so my granddad was a lifelong smoker, right?
Yes.
Do you think that played a part in his, like, getting dementia?
It potentially had an impact on his health later in his life. I also think it's really important that you socialize, because one of the things I observed with him is that he withdrew into himself, and I think it's important that you live an active lifestyle and that you socialize. So as an example, I try to play golf regularly so that I can get out there and socialize.
I knew you'd work golf into this conversation somehow. Yeah, but to be fair, that is a good way to balance work and family and everything,
Yes.
to make sure you're going out and socializing. And I will say, I'm sure that being inside so much and not being as interactive did play some part in.
And I would say you especially need to do that if you're working remotely like me, where you're cut off from daily interactions with people.
Do you think that will become a challenge in the future now that COVID is in the past and people, like so many people, are working remote?
I do. I certainly do, because I think all of the technology can take you to a certain degree, but you lack the human connection, which is important for you to keep connected with people and stay fresh.
Yeah, I feel like people don't see how important that connection actually is, and they're just like happy that they get to be working remote, and they don't know how it might actually impact them on a mental or physical level.
Agreed.
So that's interesting. And then kind of going off of that, we learned about dementia, specifically Alzheimer's. I know Granddad didn't have Alzheimer's, but my mom's mom did. Do you think that Granddad was still himself, like in the later stages of dementia? Like,
definitely not. No, his personality became more withdrawn. He was more subject to mood fluctuations on smaller issues would set him off that he wasn't before. And I think some of that was born out of a frustration of not being able to do things himself.
Yeah. And then with Nana, because she did have Alzheimer's, my mom's mom again, do you think that like it was still the like person she is, or do you kind of think it's just
Definitely
like a shell?
Not. She was a completely different person. I had observed her on a trip home a few years before she got it, and then when she got it, she was completely withdrawn and wasn't able to even recognize the people that she should know in life that kind of were around her.
Yeah, I will say I saw her shortly before she passed, and with my mom, her daughter, and she couldn't even recognize mom. So at that point, I feel like she didn't have any of her prior personality traits. Like, it didn't really feel like she was there anymore.
Yeah, and I think she had a very nice sense of humor that kind of disappeared, and things became more black and white with her when she got the Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm. And then, so when Granddad got dementia, obviously he had other health conditions as well.
Mm-hmm.
But when that occurred, do you think that it was the natural choice for Jackie, your sister, to become kind of his caregiver in that sense?
Yeah, I think she felt an obligation because she was the only child still living in the house to kind of take care of him along with my mother.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Nana also played a role in being the caregiver?
To a degree, yes. I think mostly it was Jackie, and they also had outside help from some part-time nurses that the state had provided to help him.
Do you think by assuming that position, Jackie almost maybe like put her life on hold to be there?
Yes, she did. She had very little social life. She also had an autistic child in the house, so that combined with taking care of my father and the fact that he'd wake up at night and want to wander out of the house put a lot of pressure on her.
Mm-hmm. We talked in class about how typically, like, if a parent has like a memory condition like Alzheimer's, you would, like, the oldest daughter would assume the position of caregiver. So I thought that was interesting that it did end up being Jackie, and she did have the added strain of her own son with autism and just how that must have impacted her. Yeah. I was also going to ask you, what do you feel like is most meaningful to you within life now? And do you think that that has changed since you were younger?
Yes, I think what's most meaningful now is your health, to make sure that's because if you don't have your health, you don't have your life, and then the success and the fact that your wife and your children are happy and that they can pursue their dreams.
Okay. And do you think that's different than what you may have thought was most meaningful when you were like in your 20s or 30s?
Yes, I certainly wasn't focused on my health then, and didn't have children at that point, so that was less of a kind of a focus, and it was more on me, but now it's more on others rather than just simply myself.
Okay, so you'd say it shifted from just like your focus was you, and now your focus is your family, but also your health for yourself and for the benefit of your family?
Yes, and I would say career was probably all consuming back then. I don't think it's still all important to me, but it's not all subsuming.
Okay, that makes sense. And do you think you place maybe more emphasis on like your hobbies now that you're later in life?
Yes.
Like things you enjoy?
Yes, I think it's important to enjoy the things you like and make the time for them if you can, which is difficult in today's world because everything is so compressed from a time perspective.
Yeah, I will say I think you do a very good job of finding time for your hobbies.
I try to.
Which is again golf.
And collections.
Yeah, you do like to collect things. That's always nice to have. Throughout your life, what has most surprised you about getting older?
The most surprising thing is about how quickly you physically slow down all of a sudden in your late 50s. I found it quite surprising that I was able to operate at a certain pace up to a certain time frame, and then suddenly it became much more difficult to operate in that pace, and I needed to kind of make time to kind of recuperate and take breaks.
Mm-hmm. I know that when I was like younger in elementary and middle school, you would travel a lot for work. Do you think now that you are older, like becoming older, like the physical and mental changes have impacted your ability to work, or like at least the travel portion?
I think the
of it?
travel portion of it, yes, the travel portion of it. I can't do as many longer trips with short overnight hops as I used to because it takes a little longer to recover from that kind of time and energy to do all that. So that's definitely one area, and I think you also need to kind of watch your hours at work so that you don't burn the candle at both ends.
Mm-hmm.
Pace yourself again, as I said earlier, is
Yeah.
important if you're going to be successful. Otherwise, you get diminished returns from your productivity.
I feel like obviously you work in a very demanding role and company. Do you think it's fair for them to ask you to like work so much now that you're of this age, or is that something you just choose to do?
I don't think they ask me to. I think it's from an inner drive and inner expectation of the role to be successful. But I do think all of these roles can be extremely demanding and can only be done for a certain period of time before, you're kind of get burnt out of the role, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And then something I thought was interesting is, as you know, like a long time ago, the life expectancy was much shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously now it's like just going up and up. Do you think that as it goes up and people will have to start retiring later so they can save more for retirement, like do you think that will have a big impact on the workforce in general? Like,
yeah, I think it's going to make it more difficult if that happens and those folks stay in the workforce for new folks entering the employment to kind of get the jobs they're looking for. And I also think that plus artificial intelligence and that kind of AI productivity changes are impacting the workforce as well.
Yeah. Do you use AI at all? Or have you been able to adopt that
We
into...
use it in a limited sense at my company, but we should be using it more, and we're starting to use it as we look at clinical trials.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like another thing, like going back to ageism in the workplace, is like people would assume maybe you wouldn't be able to use AI, but
Correct.
But you think you're fine with it?
I think that's a mindset rather than an age. I think if you're open to embracing new ways of doing things, you can use AI, but if you're not, and that's not, I don't think it's directly linked to your age, you may not be able to do that, or you may not be open to doing that, so to speak.
That makes sense. I think in a lot of regards, AI is not exactly the greatest anyway, so it's kind of just...
There's its pluses and minuses.
Yeah, very true. And then I wanted to ask you, I know you touched a little bit on your physical health already. I think a big stereotype in society is a lot of people view aging as very negative because they think it's going to impact not only their physical health but also their appearance. I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that you look slightly different than you did when you were in your 20s, and now that you're older, do you think that's something that bothers you, or was that something you thought would bother you when you were younger?
Yeah, it does bother me. I think you can always be in better shape and keep a little fitter. I certainly could do a much better job on that. It's tough to balance the demands of the job and make the time to do that. But that's, I think, something we all strive for.
Like, not even in regard to being fit, but just like now that you like are visibly older, like does that bother you in a way?
No, I don't. That doesn't bother me too much. No.
Okay. And then I think again you touched on this, but your physical health matters more to you now than it would have when you were younger.
Yes, and more cognizant of it.
Was there something that inspired you to make that more of a focus?
I just think as you grow older, you realize the years are there's not as many years left, and you have to make sure that you optimize the time you have left.
I will say, I think you're very on top of your health. You make all your appointments and all your vitamins and everything.
Yes, you have to do that.
Yeah, very important. And then lastly, I just wanted to ask, if you were to give advice to someone younger, knowing what you know about life at this age, what would you say?
I would say to not take the longer view and not the shorter view, and to always be not looking at the next opportunity but the one after, and plan through your life, and make sure you take the time to smell the roses and make time for yourself, and to make sure that if you do marry, that you give time and energy to that commitment, and same to your children, and that you make the time for them and make their success part of your success.
Okay, I think that's very nicely said. Thank you, Dad.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.